As we have a very diverse panel. So starting from my extreme right, Tony, who's a global academic. Tony, can I describe you that way in a nutshell? A global academic. And Duke C USA is the most highly rated custom executive education provider in the world. They've been ranked #1 by Financial Times and Business Week for the last 13 years. That is pretty much your existence, right, as an entity. So they've been around for 13 years, and every year they've been ranked worldwide #1. Mr. Srinivasan, a career finance whiz, a banker, now running a NBFC. To my left, Atul Tewari. How many of you all have sold or bought anything on Quikr.com? Not many. So Atul, we have to convert these guys into customers now. Yeah. And to my extreme left, Alok Kejriwal, the original .com and gaming poster boy in India. You know, have you all played games on Games to Win or Contest to Win or any of those? So I think, you know, our age group, you know, is not that we would have played too many of those, but I'm sure we've read about him and, you know, about the story of how he started the company, so on and so forth. So thank you all of you for joining us.
Kumaar, I was going to make a pun. I was hoping you'd say he's the original Kejriwal, but you brought the other stuff inside, nevertheless.
Well, he is the original Kejriwal. You know, and the Kejriwal who is still around and is going to be around. So we'll keep this discussion very interactive and free-flowing because you've got 4 people on stage who've been there, done it all, continue to do it. And, you know, I'm just in the middle sharing all the, you know, sunlight from them, all the reflection. The topic we've kept for the day, for the discussion is very cryptic. It just says, leaders on learning. And from their diverse backgrounds, I'm sure we can talk about a lot of the learning that they have imbibed in their various journeys and also what they would like to see, you know, going forward. So I'll start with Alok. Alok, you've come from a, you know, business family, but you charted out your own path, and that too from a manufacturing enterprise to a, you know, a gaming enterprise in an era where it wasn't cool or, you know, sorry for using the word sexy to be doing, you know, those sort of activities. So tell us how that journey was.
Sure. So I'm a good Marwadi boy, you know. I did all the good things, got married young, wanted to study really much, but, you know, I was lured into the big family setup. My father's socks company is actually a kilometer away from here, as the crow flies. But the crow doesn't fly straight in Mumbai, so it still take you 20 minutes to get there, but nevertheless. You know, life was good. You know, very cushy job. I was 22 years old, and, you know, they were calling me Babu, which I didn't understand why. But then, as good things, you know, good things never last, nor do bad things. And I realized that, I could make socks for the rest of my life. But beyond that, there was something stuck. And, you know, these are the learnings I'm going to try and uncover. All of us have gone through some, you know, whether it's career, whether it's professional, whether it's personal. In the family business setup, at least in India, I keep coming back to that because there's still a lot of entrepreneurial energy locked in those houses and, you know, boardrooms and families. There's a problem. And the problem is that the young are not being unlocked. They're not being allowed to do what they want. And I was one such, you know, prisoner of dreams. So the internet was my liberator, and it literally represented the everything that I was not happy to do. There was no labor involved. There was no chanting of, you know, slogans against me and my family. There was no, in my factory in Parel, there used to be 7 people who used to come to ask for a bribe every day. They still do. They don't come to the internet office for sure, and so on and so forth. So the one learning I had was that you don't have to be really super educated to start something. You can do it. You know, I was at the Mark Zuckerberg event yesterday in Delhi, and he said that if I could start something from a dorm in Harvard, anybody can. And the big point he raised was that if 1 billion people in the world do not have connectivity, we are robbing the world of 1 billion ideas. So to me, I still feel incomplete, not having been educated, but That doesn't matter anymore. The other thing that I really wish to kind of share is the ability to be naive. The naivety that people, that you have when you start off is what sparks a creative idea that academic or, lots of layers of learning would not allow it to spark. So when I ask myself, why do people in India do promotions in this ghastly way of a postcard business? There was no answer. And when I went to brands and agencies, they said that's the way it is done. But it didn't make sense. So I think the ability to question order and to use naivety to find a solution was my greatest learning. And the third and last, and I'll keep it short so we circulate, uh, capital comes when ideas happen. Capital always chases entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs never chase capital. If you're chasing, if you guys out there are, trying to raise money and you can't, there's a problem. And especially now. I mean, we were laughing, how do these guys raise $50 million every quarter? Because they're doing something. So, I got a call from ICICI and I didn't even know who, I thought ICICI was some branch, ATM, who cared, right? I didn't know, I was naive. And this lady said, I'm calling from the venture capital business. And I didn't know what that meant. And she said, can I have a business plan? I didn't know what that meant. And we were the first company to raise VC from, a bunch of SoftBank and Murdoch. So it just proves that if people like what you do, you will get financed. You just have to love it, and you have to do it so relentlessly that you're ready to die. That, I think, is a passion that has to be completely all pervasive. It can't be, let me try something and give up. I think that's what sets at least the entrepreneurs in the room that I know, they just don't give up.
Great, great. Atul, you're in a slightly different setup in the sense you are in a fast-growing venture. E-commerce is the taste of town right now. Like Alok said, you're raising money every quarter. I think if you open Economic Times and there's no big e-com story, you're wondering what's happened, boss. Has the market shut down? The economy's gone down? What's happened? There's no big valuation come today. In that environment where you're recruiting people all the time, you're growing at breakneck speed, what are the lessons from the trenches there? Because really you're in the trenches, right? It's a war out there, it's competitive, you're growing, you're your own competition as well. So what are some key things you're seeing?
So I think one of the important thing is what Alok just mentioned about the passion. I think that's very, very important. That all of us, or rather if I just see my life and people that I work with right now at Quikr, I think the kind of passion that people have is like enormous. Like for us, the day doesn't end. Like we always laugh that I think even 24 hours is like too short, and there are 10 other things that we have to do, and just that we are not able to get that time to do it. I may be still sleepy right now, but that's how we like doing some of these things. And as our name suggests, we are Quikr, so we had to do a lot of things quick. I think that's part number one, which kind of like helps us keep on growing. And I think the second is also that we are able to find something from everybody. And that everybody can be the person who has just walked into your door, who has no experience, and for whom it's a first job, or somebody who has worked for 15 years and this may be his third or the fourth job, or that person could also be the customer who could have written a very nasty email about something which is not working as per his or her liking. So I think it's a combination of all these things which help us create that passion and energy for ourselves, and also create that customer connect. Like I was just sharing with Alok also outside, like there was a time, and actually this still exists in certain pockets in certain cities in India, that some of the customers complained that they were not able to upload an image when they were adding a listing onto the site. So the first thing which we could have done is like we could have gotten the phone and tried to talk them out about like how to actually upload an image, but that could have been an extremely technical solution. So next thing we did was we sent some people on their motorcycle and said that go and please help upload an image for them. Now, for a listing which is free of cost, we are ready to actually invest in them, because the whole idea was that we'll go and actually see what is the problem out there. And we were able to discover some of these issues, that maybe they were on the 2G connection, or they were working on a phone for which we have not really created an app around that, but that was actually a learning for us that we were able to get back. And it's not just like maybe an office boy or a junior executive who was going there. We were actually sending some of our product managers to actually support in those kind of initiatives, because that's how we are going to be getting the learning. So I think the learning never stops. And it's up to us that how we want to close the door for that learning. So as long as the door is open, I think we'll be keep on doing things which will keep us exciting.
Great, great. I'll shift gears to KV now. So KV, you're representing the other lot, where it is still about hard P&L and cash that you generate. Both of these guys will do some other stuff, right? Yeah. So and you've seen great success under your leadership. Your company's grown several fold in the last few years. What are some of the key learnings you're seeing on the ground, given the challenges that this industry has faced in the last 5 or 6 years? Both from the people side as well as from the organizational aspect.
The businesses that are represented on the left side of the podium are new, some of the latest inventions of humankind. But the business that I represent, which is lending, is one of the oldest professions in the world. So obviously the way we look at things are a little different, but the core of any business is the same. I always compare a business to a Draupadi. You all, I'm sure, are aware of Mahabharata and what Draupadi was. She had 5 husbands, each one a character of his own. Right? Now, imagine yourselves being in the position of a Draupadi. How can you, take care of 5 completely different individuals with different needs and different demands, and still take care of all of them, satisfy all of them, and yet maintain your own mental balance and live your own, happy life? A business is exactly like a Draupadi. It has 5 different bosses, as it were. Of course, one is the shareholders, who's put in the money there. Second one is, of course, your customers. You need to be pretty much sensitive to their needs. Third one is your employees. Fourth one is your distributors and your partners, and so on and so forth. And fifth one, in especially a business like ours, the regulator. You need to be compliant with the Reserve Bank and the tax guidelines and so on and so forth. So each one of them has got its own pushes and pulls. Now, what is good for one may necessarily be not good for the other. Correct? So how do you manage these diverse pushes and pulls and yet run a business which is holistic, which is able to make sense out of its business model, and yet deliver almost good enough returns so that everybody else is happy? This is exactly the position. And that goes true for an old economy, oldest profession like ours, as well as a newest profession like what you see on the left side of the podium. Correct? So that core doesn't change. What really changes is that every time you approach a business, the business is a child of the environment, right? The way lending used to be done 2,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago was very different from the way it is being run today. Today, our understanding of who are we lending to or who are we servicing is far more critical, because unless and until I know the industry that I'm funding, I will not be able to run a good business. So therefore, this continuous learning is very, very critical. Now, we all know that, somewhere in our childhood, somebody would have told us that, 2 virtues that you must follow, which is straight from the Taittiriya Upanishad, Satyam Vada and Dharmam Chara, right? Speak the truth and live by your virtue, right? The next line, which nobody ever publicizes, which is there in the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says, Swadhyayat Ma Pramadaha, which means Swa Adhyayat, that means self-learning, do not ignore or do not move away from or do not stop. Because the day you stop learning, and that learning is more from within and from self, you die. Again, goes back to Charles Darwin's theory, any animal that does not adapt to changing circumstances will die. That's exactly what is embedded in the Upanishad. So Swadhyayat Mahapramadaha is very critical for us as an old economy business as well as for the new economy business. We got to reinvent, relearn, unlearn and relearn every day. Our own business model, when we started in 2007, we used to call ourselves as consumer finance. We used to give personal loans, car loans, we used to have our credit card. Today, we are a purely SME focused productive asset creation is our only name. In a matter of 6 years, how we have changed. But broadly, with 70% of our human population being the same. A chap who used to sell credit cards today talks about infrastructure lending. How is it possible for you to do a switch in a profitable manner? We used to make some 30, 40 crores of profit in the first year. Today, last year, we ended with 430 crores. So there is a tenfold increase in the past 7 years or 6 years, but with the same set of people who used to talk a different language then and are talking a different language today. So the self-learning, rediscovering yourselves is evergreen, irrespective of what sort of organization you are.
So this is really a great example of how KV learning and development has indeed empowered your business, because like you mentioned, people who were selling retail financial products are now selling SME loans or project financing, etc. And I have seen some of your processes as we've been interacting about our initiative in that run-up. I'll just take a shameless plug right now. We announced this initiative yesterday, and we had a launch for the Talentpreneur, where Reliance Commercial Finance and Leapvault have joined hands. And there's a platform for anybody who wishes to be in the business of talent. As we all know, the talent management is an important business, whether it's skill development, recruitment, e-learning, mobile learning, game-based learning, social media-based learning, so on and so forth. So the website address has been mentioned to all of you all. Brochures are there. KV has been very passionate about this to say that, can we seed startups, or can we help existing startups or professionals from this room who would like to come forward and say, I understand the business of talent, please empower me. Empower me with funding, empower me with mentoring from Leapvault, and say, can we do something magical? So we look forward to, seeing some of your profiles and applications out there. Tony, I think this is a great place for you to come in. As KV mentioned, how learning has played an important role in developing that talent and sort of repurposing the organization to sell different things, different products and services, and that has led to a significant rise in their bottom line. You travel the world over, and we've been interacting for many months now. You obviously work with a wide variety of industries across the world and even in India. What are the big sort of shifts on the ground that you're seeing? I know there's a lot of talk. I mean, this is a room full of learning officers and directors of training and heads of talent. So, training is coming out of our ears and pores and everything, that it's good. But we want to hear it from you, a practitioner who's seeing it across, various companies, especially in India and, neighboring countries. What do you see the big changes and the big trends emerging?
Well, thank you all for inviting me, Kumaar. Really appreciate it. And I've been coming to India now for probably the last 20 years. And increasingly, since I've moved to Singapore, but prior to that, when I was on the faculty at Duke University, I taught in a cross-continent MBA program where I had the opportunity to come to India at least twice a year. And I must say, when I was trying to think about how we'd frame this conversation today, just as the internet, as you talked about, I think it's interesting to ponder things in their absence. So if you were to think and close your eyes about what your enterprise looks like when the internet goes down, what happens? People seem to get a full frontal lobotomy, like they've lost their brain and don't know what they're supposed to do, right? The internet, I call it the invisibly pervasive web. It's like the roots that Swami talked about earlier. We only notice it in its absence. When it's here, we take it fully for granted, and how it's changed our business models as banks to the opportunities we see through the eyes of a child. Naivete is actually a strength. And the internet has fundamentally changed everything. Now we're getting into my area of research, which is disruptive technology. And then I started to think about, I worked in industry for many years. I worked for a company called Nortel Networks. Nortel Networks at that time was on a meteoric rise, 24 hours a day, not enough time, the whole 9 yards. Today, that company no longer exists. It's not on the stock exchange. The last pieces of IP were auctioned off, and Apple and Microsoft fought over them. And so I viscerally experienced what it was like to go all the way up and fall all the way down. And I started to try to look at what's the underlying cause. And the answer is leadership. If you think about any organization today and you look at them, everything else has been standardized, routinized, automated, and optimized. CRM, they're all there. MRP, every component of industry has essentially been standardized, routinized, automated, optimized. What's left? Innovation and leadership. Why? They're contextual. The situation you find yourself in, whether you're in India, Vietnam, America, England, matters. And the big difference that I'm seeing over the years that I've been studying this quite closely is leadership makes the biggest difference. Leadership is that it's the essence that fills the void of uncertainty and brings people clarity to move forward. And there's no formula for it. It's contextual. So in your context, you're filling the void by taking that naive approach to understanding the value of the internet. And he's creating a void for you to have to say, how do I recreate the business model to make it happen? And that's what leaders do. Leaders today are stepping into the breach of uncertainty, confident in the knowledge that they can deal with any eventuality. In other words, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, Swami said. But if we're grounded and if we have conviction and passion for what we're doing, and if we're curious, insanely curious, to learn and go through uncomfortable unlearning, give up some prior orthodoxy so that we can move forward, just as the banks have done, we then have the opportunity to bring the prosperity to society, not just to business or enterprise, but to society. But to me, I really firmly believe at Duke University, I'm on faculty at Duke, we talk about consequential leadership, that we have to cultivate leaders of consequence, which means that their thoughts and actions deliver value beyond themselves, as Swami talked about. And we believe at Duke that this next decade, particularly in India, Southeast Asia region, will probably be the most consequential decade of the century. There's no question that this is Asia's century. The big question for us is, from a leadership perspective, the decisions and actions that are taken over the next decade will have significant ramifications moving forward. And I could list a million things about how we power the growth that's happening in this region and what that means for the environment. There's lots of concerns where the authenticity and the conviction and the groundedness of leaders will be increasingly important in a world that seems to be spinning faster and faster.
Great. Tony, you mentioned something very interesting around consequential leadership. In India, we are obviously going through a huge change as an economy, as a society. And all of you representatives of the panel are driving change in some way or the other. A question to both of you, Alok and Atul. Given the high growth markets or environment you all are in, in the regular corporate setup where you've got structures and processes, systems already in place, and one could argue a certain amount of luxury to be able to say that, if I have an employee joining in or 100 or 500 joining in, I will have a set induction process and training process, and we'll make it cushy for them to be able to hit the ground running, right? But if you're growing at 100, 200, 300%, which I'm sure at some point of your evolution you all have experienced that for long periods of time, how do you choose between investing in people that time, which is maybe in the classroom or whatever other training methodology you use, or just saying, my investment is I'm just going to throw you into, deep waters and, see if you sink or swim. I'm sure this is a thought that has crossed your minds, saying that, I obviously can't hire, the most talented people for that specific job. It's going to be a fit, maybe not always the best piece in the jigsaw. Do I invest? Do I just get them into action? Or like Atul said, I've got customer complaints going in, I've got a new, let's say, a customer service representative. Should I just send him out, or do I wait for him to get officially trained and certified and all of that stuff? So to both of you.
So this is actually a very interesting question, because now as Quikr as a company, we are a little over 6 years old. And about, I would say 1.5 years ago, this was a thought which started coming into our mind, that as we are hiring people, I think we'll soon reach a stage where we'll have to start investing in people. So just to give you some sense, we were like, maybe about 400 people in January 2012, and right now we're touching about 1,500 people. And this is across locations. We've got offices outside Mumbai also. So about 8-9 months ago, we started investing in development of a leadership model in our firm. So we looked at an outside company, which was started by ex-consultants of some of the big fives, and they actually worked with us to develop a model that what are the core competencies that we need at a leadership level. And we identified at least 35 people in our firm who need to be part of this training and whom we want to develop, so that as we are developing, they are also developing enough to support us in our growth. And as new people are getting added, so we have identified the different layers and different kind of functions that each one of them is expected to perform, and there is a set amount of training for certain profiles that we have hired at different times. We have created even some sort of a training department which looks at the training needs, whether that's a process need or that's a behavioral need, depending on where we want the people to be successful, and accordingly kind of like keep track of how they are doing it. So some of this will sound very old and archaic like any other company, but there are certain innovations, etc., which we keep on doing just to make some things exciting. So for example, we'll have we want people to be joining only on Monday, because that will help us optimize our training needs. But after filling up the form, suppose they arrive at 9 and they are done by 10:30 or so, I have a set session with them at 11 o'clock. So I am the person who is supposed to welcome them into the company. And they may be at different levels. Somebody could be a customer care executive, somebody could be a product manager, somebody could be even a director level. But I'm supposed to actually welcome them into the firm and spend at least an hour with them, just to give a sense that we are all equals. And just to give a sense that we are very hands-on people, just to give a sense that we all have to work together to make it a success. So again, ideas is just to keep learning from them, because some of them will come with some interesting ideas, and if you can find that idea, find that spark, then and there itself, it's just going to help us, rather than discovering that spark after 6 months, or the person coming back and saying that, you know what, I'm not happy working here because I thought I could do this, but I'm not able to do out there. So we try to do all these kind of innovations which help us learn, which I was mentioning in my earlier point as well. Like learning from everybody is important for us.
Great.
I'm quite the contrarian to this discussion. So we're about 120 people, and we're actually trying to say that smaller is more. I'm in the creative business, right? So we don't want more people. We want more ideas. We want more imagination. For me, it's Walt Disney, and how does Walt Disney work? How does that one company, one person do everything incredible? So how many people here in the room have used Instagram? Awesome. So does anybody guess how many people? So Instagram was the first of the block. In fact, I think they undersold. They were bought for $1 billion way back in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, by Facebook. And it was a jaw-dropping acquisition at that time, because no one had heard of it in a larger context, and it had made no money. Still doesn't make any money. But does anybody know how many people Instagram had when it was acquired? So it had 13 people. And 13. And that's what they had done with their brains and their creativity and their imagination. So Kumar, for us, we're saying, look, I think the recruiting processes, I think as Professor said, is pretty much now, if I'm hiring tech, I know what I'm looking for. If I'm hiring product manager, I know what I'm looking for. So a lot of the hiring is done basis a protocol which pretty much filters what you're looking for. But I think it's the magic. It's that it's the twinkle in the eye that we want. It's that bizarreness. So I'll rather leap into, I have never understood how to interview someone. it's chaotic. So I ask them, what do you do beyond work? I don't want to know what you're going to do at work. What's your passion? What's your hobby? And I want to peek in the unknown, because that's the dimension we want to bring here. It's a kind of quasi-metaphysical approach to building games. But on the more practical side, because we're small, I always lunch with everybody. So the lunching is the informal but formal experience, because you're sharing. We do town halls every quarter. So we pretend that our employees are our investors. And we report back to our employees, which I'm going to do today at 5 p.m. And I'm as shaky as I am as in a board meeting, because we're going to have the same graphs, the same DAUs, and we're going to report back to them saying, hey guys, this is what we did, and this is what we didn't do, and this is what we got to do. And at the end of the day, it's like I always tell the one thing I tell employees is that you're hiring me as much as I'm hiring you, because you're going to spend 3 or 4 years of your life in this organization. So it's very symbiotic, Kumar. It's no longer one to. I'm not hiring the guy. I mean, he's hiring me. So I want to know what he's going to bring. And it always happens when you kind of, it's amoebic. You have to let things happen.
That's really interesting. So, just to clarify for everyone, Alok's company makes games.
Yeah, mobile games.
Mobile games. And, this model I don't think will work, let's say, in KV's company, right, which is giving away loans. So he can't allow people to say, boss, let's have lunch and, do it, right? I mean,
but I think KV's got a problem, because some of the returns that people have made on gaming companies like Zynga, which is not anymore a star, but Supercell, which turns out $1 billion every year, would not be an investment KV would make, and I think it'd be making a mistake.
No, he doesn't invest. He lends money.
That's even better, right? Silicon Valley Bank lends today. SVB lends in the market. There are so many more institutional, because a lot of, on that topic, right? And I hope to have a rebuttal. A lot of entrepreneurs who know themselves now and are looking at clearly a path to profitability don't want to dilute anymore. And there are a lot of banks, Silicon Valley Bank being the quintessential example, who recognize it and said, hey, dude, I don't want your equity. I want to give you loans.
Sure.
And, turn it back to me as an IRR. So
I don't want to hunt you. I want to farm you.
Yeah, capital has lost all its blocks. It's become, like mold. It goes the way you want it.
Sure. Coming to you, KV, some leadership or learning insights that you're seeing, given the journey you've had now. Where do you see this panning out, given the current market, given, let's say, the war for talent, given the heightened need for speed, or let's say need for change?
I think the need for change is going to be ever present. And so long as you recognize that as an opportunity and you create systems and processes within your organization to tap that, I think you can have a strong platform to work upon. While I don't think our business can be as creative as what Alok was talking about, but there is a huge amount of possibility of being creative and innovative in our own business, although it may be a pretty old and staid kind of a profession. Now, I'll give you I'll share a certain amount of example with you. About 2 or 3 years ago, we said that, look, the market is too virgin and too green in this country. When we look at our market, I'm talking about the small and medium enterprises. Now, it's an RBI statistic, so therefore has to be true, that only about 7% of the SMEs in this country get formal means of funding. 93% are what you can call as financially excluded SMEs, 93%, and that's millions of enterprises. So obviously there is a huge market out there. But the question is, in the past 60, 70 years of our existence as a country, what have we done? Why have we not reached out? So one of the thought process that we had was that maybe following a canned approach does not work. So you need to be innovative in terms of your approach to the customer, in terms of your products, in terms of how you really understand the financials and so on and so forth. So we launched what we call as an innovation council. The basic job of the innovation council was to promote and nurture ideas which are innovative in our own business. Basically meaning a different customer segment, different way of looking at a customer, different approaches, usage of technology in a particular manner, and so on and so forth. Now, I'll give you a simple example. In the past 2 odd years of completed financial years that we have done, the products, new products that have been created out of this Innovation Council methodology account for 12% of our total book size today. 12%, which is in excess of 2,000 crores. So that's a lot of money, right? And why did people participate? I'll give you an example. First year, I had no clue as to how this will pan out, but I was surprised and shocked that 400 out of, when we had about 900 odd people in our company, 400 people participated in generating 95 ideas. We finally chose 11 of them, 7 of them succeeded. Okay? When I say succeed, it should have done at least 100 crores of business or more. Right? So we had kept a fairly stiff benchmark. The others put together got about another 200-300, etc. So it wasn't a real failure. The trigger for that was, we said that if your objective, if your idea fails, the company takes the loss. If your idea succeeds, the profit is shared with you. So the removal of the threat, encouraging people to think wide, and putting a mechanism of governance underneath, because unbridled or uncontrolled innovation can be disastrous, especially in a business where we have to take a lot of risk. But you can find a way to manage the risk and the innovation in a sort of a way that you achieve the golden mean. And that's exactly what we try to do. Are we perfect today after 3 years? No, we still are discovering. But that is the fun of the game. So more and more people, if I can enthuse 40% of my people at various levels and various branches to think innovatively, I think we've got something great going, in spite of us being in an old profession. I think that's one thing. And what is the engine for all this? As an HR department, as a learning department, our job is to provide the necessary wherewithal and the comfort for people to open their eyes and see the world and think for themselves. That is the basic learning that we have had in the past 2-3 years on this.
Great, great. Tony, coming to you again. What do you see the key differences now, since you've been coming to India, like you said, for 20 years now, and you've been interacting with corporations of different size and nature? What are the key difference you're seeing now, with regards to talent and organization behavior in the country today?
Well, I think there's, Peter Drucker was mentioned yesterday, and he's certainly someone that I really resonate with in terms of his thinking, offered up the notion of routinization. And the example he gave was the printing press. So the printing press was an innovation that came from the wine press. And for the first 50 years, do you know what the printing press was used for?
Religious Bible.
It was used to print German Bibles. 50 years hence, someone had an insight. And that insight was, we could print other books too. And that ushered in enlightenment in a quite serious way. So what we have with technology these days is a massive amount of unrealized potential. And it's leadership's role to unlock it sooner than the 50 years of the printing press. So if you fast forward now to the internet, Andy Grove, and I do agree with him, he said we're about 2% into the change that we're going to see. But I don't believe that the change is going to happen through the routinized process of learning. So what I'm saying by that is we can't just take the internet and automate and accelerate it. If we do that, we're just increasing the efficiency with which we train poorly. Instead, what we have to do is exactly what each one of these leaders demonstrated in their narratives. At 11 o'clock every Monday, I meet with my people, and I think your exact words were so that they understand we're all equal. I treat my employees like shareholders, and I'm as worried about my conversation with them as I am about the shareholders, because that's the principle I adhere to. I've set up an innovation fund where now 12% of my revenues are coming from that, and put it all up. These are all 3 leaders who, through their behaviors and actions, are institutionalizing learning cultures in their organizations that increase their likelihood of future success because you're building resilience into the system like the roots that Swami talked about. Or like Dr. Khanawal yesterday talking about the morning meetings in Bank of Baroda. My observation about leaders is that they see the world through beginners' eyes and recognize the opportunity. They approach it with passion and conviction, but they're willing to have their mind changed, and they set people free. And if you can get all of those things together and live in that constant tension and paradox, the potential that can be released is huge. And if I may, having come to India for all these years, and I grew up in Mauritius, so I had lots of friends who were originally from India, you see it with this one leader, Modi. You feel it. I felt it in the room yesterday. It's different. What a difference a leader can make. Now, can you put your finger on one thing? No, but it's the crystallization that comes together. That's what leaders have to do more and more today.
Great. Thanks so much. I think this is a good time to take some questions from the audience. We have mics around. Please raise your hand and just introduce yourself and a question, please.
Hi, I'm Smarnika. I represent a company called Swiss Re. That's the full form of Swiss Reinsurance. My question is for all of you. So you've shared some really good insights on different perspectives of leadership. From wearing a leader's hat, what is your take on how do you see a learning function or a learning officer's contribution in supporting the leadership development for an organization, and as well as individual leaders' development? And please, if you could also share some of your personal insights, that'll be very interesting to hear from some of you. Thank you.
Can I go first?
Please go ahead.
So I love the question, actually. Thank you. I was actually waiting for a trigger to precipitate this. And it's the processes, that so if you call it, I don't have a chief learning officer at my company because I am that guy. I'm unfortunately many CXOs, but one of them is CLO. And
So the CEO as CLO.
yeah, that's ma'am, what I've done for this, right? I think the fundamental concept that I want to introduce in this discussion is that the learning has to not come from traditional sources. And I say traditional sources means anything, whether it's academia or material. So I have worked on two principles so far in my 15 years as an entrepreneur. I always sit in an aisle seat in the middle of an aircraft so that I can talk to two people on the side, two people on the other side, and hopefully one on the cross. So there are 5 new people I generally talk to in an airplane. Because I'm taking a business airplane, I know I'm not going to talk to people I don't want to talk to. And believe it or not, in the 15 years, just as a statistic, I've met 7,500 people by now. That's, just meeting people. That's 2.5 new people a day. And the amount of learning you can get from people who are selling, whether they're selling farmers' crop or whether they're selling tractors to selling, cars and sending people home. I was feasting on his brain before we started because I want to know, how does this guy do it? So one is it comes from anybody. And 2 is I keep saying, ask the question to the unasked. There's a guy right next to us at Phoenix Mall who sells Frankie. How many of you guys eat Frankie? Okay, I don't know this guy, this room is full of zombies, man. They don't do anything, I think. They just learn. So, sorry. So, there's a Frankie seller at Phoenix Mall, and I asked him for a vegetarian Frankie. And this is very shocking. This is what he asked me. He said, "Are you sure you want a veg Frankie?" I said, "Yeah, I've never eaten non-vegetarian Frankie." He said, "No, sir, because, I know a lot of people like yourself who want to eat a non-veg Frankie, and I can give you a non-veg Frankie in a veg wrapping." So I said, "Oh." He says, "We get that all the time. All the Jains and Gujaratis come here, and they ask for chicken, but they say, 'Give it to me in the green wrapper.'" Now that triggered off this thought that this impersonation of character, the avatar creation in games, I am a guy, but I want to be a girl, and chat up with girls and then tell you I'm a guy. This whole business of social, dating is exactly what the Frankie guy was talking about. So the point is that, you have to fling your mind across many, bounce your mind like a pinball and you'll get something. And that's what I keep telling the team back again. That, hey, guess what the Frankie guy told me? Versus, I read this in Wall Street Journal.
I think I don't have much to add after what Alok said, but I think the learning starts at every place. Like the other day, I was sitting in I'd taken a cab to go home, and this guy, and this is typically I do, I always try to strike a conversation with the cab guy just to understand what this guy is thinking. Obviously, I'm trying to promote my company there in a sly manner. So I asked him, I said, like, what do you, general conversation started, and then finally he said, Sir, aap kahan kaam karte hain? And because our office is Raghuvanshi Mills, just next to Phoenix Mills, and I said, I work for Quikr. He says, then immediately he said, photo khech Quikr pe bech. I said, okay, my job is done. This guy knows me. So then he started asking me questions like, he had an Innova, and basically the Innova, he wanted to buy a TV because he wants to he feels that he can get more customers because the TV can actually go for Lonavala and on Mahabaleshwar kind of a thing. He says, Quikr pe sasta milega kya? I said, yeah, bilkul. So what I did was, obviously he didn't have a smartphone, but I asked him, I gave him we have a toll-free number. I said, why don't you give a call and you can register yourself? And I ended up, before getting down, I had searched for about 3 or 4 places where he could actually go and talk to them and find what the DVD player, etc., what he needed out there. But the reason why I mentioned this conversation is because I think the guy ended up giving me an idea that there are a lot of people, we just at times when you talk about internet, we are always thinking about people, online people, but there are a lot of these offline people who may also have a need, and it's all about reaching out to them. And that actually triggered off some other ideas that we had in our firm, that how do we actually reach out to people who may not have an internet, or who may not have actually, or who may have seen our TV ads or like a billboard like this taxi guy, but may not have the wherewithal to actually get onto the web. So how do we actually create a tool to support them? And that's where we did something interesting in the last few months. I can't disclose that right now. Some of you will see it soon. But the whole idea was that how we can actually reach out to them. So again, the learning comes from anybody. We actually encourage people to spend at least 5-7% of their time thinking of new ideas. Like, unfortunately, for a lot of them who work with me, they know that nothing is impossible. So before they come to me with a problem, they know what my answer is. They say, okay, we'll go back and get you a solution around it. So that's how we work. So the idea is that if they are closest to the problem, I know they will be also close to the solution also. It's just a question of just like pushing them a little bit, but with a little bit of a love. Because if you push them a little too much, then it'll be going to be a different story. But I think in most of the cases, they themselves get the answer, and then they feel very empowered that, look, we have found a solution. And that's what we want.
Great, great. KV, you would like to?
I think I keep saying this, the best HR department is the one that doesn't exist. Primarily, it means that No. I'm going to give a job which will last for the next 50 years.
Let me just come in there. He's saying HR department. We are learning guys.
No.
Over and above HR.
Learning, or for that matter, any department is a department that doesn't exist, right? What I'm really hinting at is that if you've been successful in creating a culture of learning, your job is done. Then you are redundant and can possibly go into sales or IT or whatever else, right? Honestly, where there could still be a need. The whole issue, therefore, is creation of a culture whereby instead of pushing people to learn, push will take you up to a distance, but then a pull is a far more powerful force. And instilling that pull factor of somebody from within feeling that, hey, I need to do this, I think it's a huge task. So somewhere if we focus upon the absolutely bottom, the root strengthening that we've been speaking in the morning, I think that is the critical role for any chief learning officer to play. And that's it. The rest of it will fall into place automatically.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, and again, these leaders are demonstrating it through their actions, is they're creating the conditions within which learning emerges. So I think learning is going through its own transition where we're moving from content creation to context curation. We're trying to create nurturing environments within which people can be their true selves. And I think each one of these leaders has demonstrated that they're trying to create environments that allow people to flourish from an innovation perspective, from being everybody's equal perspective, from what is the next new idea that's going to come. And also, there is research to this. So what you all also talked about was what's called the strength of weak ties. And the strength of weak ties means that sometimes that smallest sapling at the edge of the network of redwoods is the one that people connect to the most. So those of us who meet in this conference today, we have a weak tie. But if we get a connection, if somebody writes back to us, we're actually more likely to respond to them than to someone close to us. And we don't know psychologically why that is, but the research is pretty clear that that's what happens. So in your five and a half people, is that possible? That's not possible. 5 people, 2.5, however many thousand you've hit over the years, you're creating a network that the edge of that network might be a weak tie, but the impact of the edge of the network, like the taxi driver, has influenced capital flow to achieve a purpose that you feel strongly about. And it's your leadership that does that. So to me, just very briefly, we worked to look at situations where expertise is critical. The misapplication of expertise means that people die. And this is teaching hospitals. And we worked for 2 years looking at Johns Hopkins University. And on every outcome measure, they're successful. The least death rates, the most publications, the highest placement in other esteemed hospitals in the United States. And their whole culture, the culture that they've engendered at Hopkins, is they put the person with the least knowledge in charge of the patient. And by putting the person with the least knowledge in charge of the patient, the whole network wraps around that person with the least knowledge who translates that to make sure that the patient lives. Very mature advancement of a learning culture where that's why they succeed. They've created the right conditions for learning to happen.
Great. That's a great example, Tony. I know it's been a great session and I'd love to keep this conversation going, but we're just at the, time where we need to say, we need to close this session. Thank you so much for your time, and I think it's been a great session. A big round of applause for all of them, ladies and gentlemen.